So a lot of you probably go and get coffee every morning, but you probably don't think about the people that are making your coffee and the stuff they have to know to make that perfect blend. I'm Romero Starks, and today we're going to talk to Brandon Elliott, a local barista, and he's going to tell us not only about his job, but some of the stuff he has to know to do that job. Stay tuned for this episode of On the Inside. So, where did being a barista begin? Is that something you just kind of wanted to get into, or was it just something that, oh, well, we're hiring, and you're like, you know what, I think I'll try it out?
Yeah, it's pretty much like you described. I realized, hey, I'm not going to have a job here in 2 months. I need to, my contract's expiring at my current job. I need to find a new job, so I went up to my local Second Wave coffee shop, got a job there, and it's been about 3 years now that I've been there.
Okay. So what were you doing before you were being a barista?
I actually worked as a teacher's assistant in a special needs daycare.
Okay. Interesting.
So quite a career shift.
So just something you were kind of, aside from the contract, obviously, were you just kind of tired of that field?
I actually really, really enjoyed it, but it was just the contract. Right. Going down from full year to 9 months out of the year, like I got to work the other 3 months, and
right.
So I just made the career shift, and here I am.
So 3 years in.
3 years in.
Knee deep in the coffee beans now.
Oh yeah.
What would you say is your favorite part about being a barista?
What is my favorite part about being a barista? It's really a toss-up, depending on the day, between the awesome customers that you get to see every day and the coffee itself. Just brewing the coffee, drinking the coffee, interacting with the coffee, everything you can do with coffee. Like, it's fantastic. So.
Gotcha. So what are some of the downfalls? I'm sure you're dealing with any type of food service or drink service. You have to deal with people and their complaints with it.
Oh, exactly. Just like some of the customers are the absolute best, some of them are not the absolute best. So I would say the customers are both the highs and the lows of being a barista.
Two-sided coin.
It is a very two-sided coin. You get to deal with some of the most wonderful people in the world, and then you get to deal with some people who haven't had their coffee yet.
Gotcha. Well, that's your job. You're
exactly.
there to turn the day around.
Exactly, and that's what we really try to do there.
So if you could think of a time in particular, it was probably like, man, I just really enjoyed that day at work, or that interaction like really made me feel good. Is there one that comes off the top of your head?
There actually isn't. It's never about like those super, super highs, but it's always just like the little things that make you smile. Just somebody's smile as you hand them a beverage and make it just for them. Or just hearing somebody's voice. There's certain people like just hearing their voice puts a little smile on their face. I'm like, oh, they're here. They're getting their coffee. It's good to see them. Like, it's that routine of just like those little things in the day that just like every day it's the same, but that's not a bad thing.
Right. So on the flip side, have you ever just had it with a customer? You're like, man, that was the worst day I've ever had.
Oh yeah,
I'm
who
about ready to
hasn't?
be done.
Yep. And that's when you, whenever you've just had it, you can't stop smiling. That's when you really adopt your, oh, how are you doing today? Oh, it's doing great, aren't we?
Start playing it up.
Oh, you start playing it up, and that's when you can truly tell that they're done.
Right.
It's like the barista code where another barista that you can pick up on.
Right. You're like, okay, that person just had a bad.
I'm gonna go sub in for him, give him a little break in the back. Breathe.
Gotcha. So aside from the obvious, baristas make coffee. That's what most people think of. What does being a barista entail?
Depending on where you work, obviously a barista is going to be more than just making coffee. You're going to have, if you do food, you're probably going to be working with the food side of the establishment. Most cafes have at least some sort of pastry. You're also going to be working in things like keeping your machines clean, all that little side work that goes around making coffee that helps keep you functioning. Those would be other aspects of being a barista.
So what is something that you think baristas do that goes pretty like under the radar that not a lot of people even know that you guys have to deal with or that is part of your job?
Fun story, actually. So baristas, we kind of do it all, right? Like, we're running the cafe. I actually watched a new barista walk out because, quote, she was not there to do dishes.
Oh.
So maybe like that, like a lot of people don't expect, like, you're doing all that cleaning and maintenance behind the scenes to keep that coffee going. It's more than just making the coffee. It's being knowledgeable about your equipment and your brewing methods.
Right. So how hard of a job would you say being a barista is? Because it's not like you're just doing, oh, you want your coffee black or do you want some sugar and cream? You're making like thorough like coffee creations, all types of flavors and stuff in it. How hard is it to like get those recipes down?
It's actually pretty difficult, I would say. Obviously, it's not like the most difficult job in the world, but
it's high level stuff.
It takes like, it's not like you jump in and you're immediately going to know things. Like, there's at least several months of learning curve of just like memorizing recipes, perfecting your both your steaming and the way you brew your coffee. Like, there's little things that you pick up along the way that, like, to truly master your craft, that it's not like the easiest thing in the world.
Right. So how does training work for a barista? They kind of, here's the recipes, you kind of slowly work on them, and then they're like, all right, Brandon, let me see you make X, Y, Z, and see how well you did it or if you did it the right way.
So training, like, you kind of give the overview and you get like that kind of basic knowledge in their head where they think, I might have this. And then you just throw them into the fire.
Gotcha.
And you either watch them burn or you watch them be refined, because that's the best way to learn, is just like getting into the thick of things, getting your hands dirty, going after drinks. And you're going to make some mistakes, but as long as somebody that's experienced is there watching you and correcting you, like, that's how you're going to learn, is that hands-on experience.
Gotcha.
I can tell you recipes all day long. You're not going to remember them. It's when you do it that really cements it in your head.
So how long would you say in this 3-year process did it take you to be the barista aficionado that you are today?
2 days.
2 days. just a immediate pro.
Probably a couple months, and then I've been slowly refining my craft to even greater heights after that. But like a couple months to get like a really solid grasp.
So at this point, being that you have been doing it for so long, are you somebody that is kind of looked to that, hey, Brandon can help me, or hey, Brandon, why don't you help this person with that?
I certainly like to think of myself as that. Whether or not I am that, I
don't know. Right. So before doing this as a job, how big of a coffee fan were you?
I wouldn't say I was like the world's biggest coffee fan. I've definitely like increased my taste for coffee since being a barista. Like, I've always loved and enjoyed drinking coffee, but definitely since I became a barista, I've definitely refined my palate.
Got you. So now do you have more like exquisite taste with coffee? Oh, I don't just drink this, I like this type of coffee.
I would say I'm definitely pickier, yes. Like, I will not lie, I will still every once in a while just get some good old, like, awful sitting on the burner for 6 hours gas station coffee as like this is terrible, but I love it.
Right.
But that's not my normal go-to anymore.
Got you. So how do you think just because there's such a wide variety of coffees to work with, you haven't got burnt out? Because you think of a lot of people, they work at a certain restaurant, this or that, they're like, oh, I don't eat there anymore. Oh, I don't drink this anymore, because they work around it constantly. How do you think you avoided that type of burnout?
2 things, actually. One would be the caffeine addiction that sets in, because, like, even if you're like, oh, I don't want this, you still need your caffeine. You're still going to want to function. So that obviously comes into play. But no, yeah, like, every week I try to change up what I'm drinking. From like, maybe this week I'm drinking a coffee that's sourced from Latin America, and next week I'm going to go for something more Asia Pacific. And the totally different taste profiles help keep it from getting old, as do experimenting with new brewing methods. Just changing up little things can definitely help keeping things from getting too old or too stale or too routine.
See, common folk like myself only know, regular old coffee. You go to Schnucks or Walmart, wherever, you grab yourself a tub of coffee, throw it in the...
Oh, yeah.
So, you're busting out these regions of coffee.
Oh, yeah.
Explain that to me. What would you say are some of the differences in coffee from different parts of the world? Because a lot of people just think coffee is coffee.
Coffee is coffee, but there's several things to talk about the coffees in between the different regions and what makes them so vastly different. It's not only the soil that it's grown in and like the climate that it's grown in, but it's also the infrastructure of the country itself.
Gotcha.
And how the coffee is processed can lead to vastly different flavors and flavor profiles from the coffee themselves, such as coffees in Africa that might still use the traditional processing method of just like drying the coffee cherry onto the bean itself and then removing it. That leads to a much different flavor than like the Latin American wash processing method, which will actually soak the entire coffee cherry in water to remove all of the pulp of the cherry from the bean. That totally changes the profile of the coffee itself. So there's a lot of different things from the regions themselves that go into making a very unique cup.
Gotcha. So with you now having such an extensive knowledge of coffee, do some of your friends look to you for like advice like, hey, Brandon, what do you feel about this type of coffee? Should I try it? Should I stop drinking my Folgers or whatever? Should I do this?
Absolutely. And I try not to be like too pretentious about it. I don't go into their house and be like, throw all of this out. You're terrible.
You need these.
Get rid of this. No,
Right.
You're done. No, I try not to do that. I try to like look at the little things that can really help them elevate their coffee game, and be like, hey, I know you brew like this. Have you tried brewing it this way? Just change it up a little bit, and slowly be like, I recommend this and I recommend that. You might try this sometime if you got wanting to spend a little extra in your budget on coffee this month.
Right.
Try to make those small suggestions, because I know like not everybody's going to want to budget that much towards coffee. Like
Right.
if it's not a passion for you, you're not going to spend as much on it. So I try to like not be like, hey, you need to do this very expensive thing,
Right.
but instead recommend those small changes that you can make without like going like full into it.
So you would say your barista knowledge and skills have translated now outside of the job.
Oh, most definitely.
Right.
Most definitely.
So as far as brewing methods, you said there's like different ways to brew. Explain that a little bit for me.
Oh, there are many different ways to brew coffee. The most standard way to brew coffee would definitely be like your standard drip coffee maker. Mm-hmm. Everybody's got one in their home. That's how you're going to brew coffee for most people. And that's great because it's easy, it's relatively mess-free, and you can brew a big pot of it if you're having company. But you actually, I feel, lose a lot in it because it's just kind of that mass brewing. You can lose a lot of the great things in your cup if you're not brewing in other different methods. My personal favorite method would be the French press, which actually, in lieu of a filter, uses a metal sieve to remove the grounds after they've actually like just brewed in the water for the length of time. And what that does with the metal sieve instead of the filter, you're not removing the natural oils of the coffee, which gives you a lot more flavor.
Gotcha. Just quickly explain to me, what's the difference between coffee and espresso? Because I know we're going to get into some coffee tasting later.
Oh, absolutely.
So break it down for the common folk.
So coffee and espresso is simply a method of brewing coffee. It is hot water is forced through at high pressure through packed down compact grounds. And what that leads to is a very concentrated, small amount of coffee.
Got you. All right, well, thank you very much, Brandon. That is Brandon, the barista extraordinaire. When we come back on this episode, we're going to sit down with Brandon a little more, taste a couple of different coffees, and talk to him some more about some of the different coffees that are out there, and maybe some that we should try at home. We get back to this episode of On the Inside.
Start a story. Adopt at theshelterpetproject.org.
I love my sister.
My heart doesn't see race. Love is love.
So now that we talked to Brandon about what it's like to be a barista, we're going to sit down with him and taste test a couple of different brews from different regions of the world. It's going to be something a little different than what you're used to trying in the morning. All right, so it is time for some coffee tasting. What are we gonna taste?
So the first thing that I have here for you is we have a single origin coffee sourced out of Guatemala from the Antigua region. We're going to be French pressing that, and we're going to be pairing that with a milk chocolate today, which should bring out some great flavors from the coffee itself. We will be French pressing. I've already measured out the coffee here. You want to do about 2 tablespoons per 6 fluid ounces of water. I went ahead and measured that with a nice coarse grind, like a rough sand is what you're looking for in a French press. So we're going to get started here. It's going to take 4 minutes to brew, and you just want to gently pour your water, making sure to wet all of your grounds. I'm going to give this a little rotation for better coverage.
So gentle. You gotta treat your coffee with care. That's how you get the final product to taste so good, right?
Exactly. Just be gentle, covering all your grounds. Once you have it filled up, you can just pop your lid on it, like so.
All right, so is it ready to go yet?
It has been about 4 minutes, yes, and we will slowly plunge the grounds. You want to do this slowly, not just shove it down, because if you try to shove it too quickly, grounds will like push up through the sieve, and you will get more grounds in your coffee than even the typical French press grid.
Gotcha. So what is the benefit of the French press as opposed to your traditional coffee maker? Throw it in the filter and close it and set it.
It's actually the lack of the filter itself. The filter actually will remove a lot of the oils, whereas the fine metal sieve will let those through, and those oils are what contribute a lot to the flavor of the coffee.
Gotcha.
So here, I will pour you some first.
Oh, please do. So you can just catch all that good steam coming off.
Oh,
of there.
yeah.
How
And if you
does
look
one-
here, that's actually just like the coffee oils at the top. They're starting to collect,
Okay.
and
That's
you can
what
see
that
them
is.
in your cup as well. It's very, very good, and that's going to contribute a lot to what makes the French press unique and great.
Gotcha. So how does one go about drinking coffee? I'm a sissy when it comes to coffee. I do like the way coffee tastes, but I'm always terrified to scald my tongue at first sip. So teach me the ways of drinking coffee effectively.
All right, so I'll just walk you through it here. The first thing that we're going to do is actually we're going to smell our coffee and get that aroma and just prepare ourselves for it.
Gotcha. That's some good smelling coffee there.
Smell of the coffee. You can start picking up on some of the flavors that are in there actually.
Teach me the way.
Smell like you can smell the light cocoa. It's very subtle, but you can smell that more than
It's
just
almost
the
like
coffee.
wine tasting. This is
It is. It's very similar. So the first thing that we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and sip our coffee. And what I actually like to do is I like to slurp my coffee because A, it sprays it across your tongue. You're going to get that flavor across your entire tongue. And B, you're going to, it'll cool down a little bit in your mouth rather than just that solid liquid hitting your tongue.
Gotcha.
So go ahead and sip that for me.
Oh God, here we go. Ooh, there we go. Get a little condensation on the glasses there. It's
Yeah.
hard to drink
Fog it
coffee
up.
when you've got glasses. It gets a little foggy.
that's-
You can't see what you're getting into.
It helps remove your focus from everything around you and only onto the coffee.
Embrace that coffee.
Exactly. So after we've tried that, you just kind of let it sink in, appreciate the coffee. Then I've got chocolate here for us to try as well.
So,
grab
what
yourself a
is the
piece.
job of the chocolate here? You mentioned something about enhancing the palate.
Yeah, like I talked about those subtle cocoa flavors that are in the coffee.
Right.
You'll actually get a lot better of the cocoa flavor. Yeah, go ahead.
Just want to make sure I do this the right way, of course.
Oh yeah. Good chocolate.
Yeah, there's quality chocolate.
And go ahead and drink that with that chocolate still melting in your mouth.
It's almost like a quick little hot cocoa blend there.
And even as that chocolate goes away, and just the lingering flavors are still on your tongue.
Right.
Chocolate works great for several reasons. One, bringing out the cocoa notes in certain coffee. Chocolate's great. but also the sugar that's in chocolate. Sugar is always going to enhance the flavors of things that it's in, so you can get that flavor enhancement without adding a bunch of sugar to the coffee itself.
Right. So, with that said, do you typically, is that how you drink your coffee, kind of offset it with something sweet so your coffee itself doesn't have to be super sweet?
Depending, yeah. I mean, I will drink it just black without anything, but
Really?
pairing it directly with something that is sweet is often a great way to go with pairing things, yes.
So, do you think that is better for the coffee taste itself than adding stuff to it? Do you think like adding stuff to it takes a little bit away from the coffee flavor?
I think that most of the time it does. Like, obviously, like a little bit of things, like if you're wanting vanilla in your coffee, like vanilla is a fantastic flavor. I'm not going to look down on anybody that wants to add flavors to their coffee, because like flavors are good.
Right.
But at the same time, appreciate a black cup of coffee. There's a lot to be appreciated there that I think a lot of people just kind of gloss over.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just think of plain old coffee as, ugh, you know.
Exactly.
That guy drinks coffee black.
It's
doesn't
kind
add
of like a
anything.
good liquor. Like, sometimes a good liquor is great straight. Sometimes it's good mixed with something.
Fancy. Alrighty, so we've got the French press out of the way. The Guatemalan, our Antiguan
Yes.
blend. What's next?
We're actually doing a coffee from Indonesia. It's from a couple different growing regions in Indonesia, and kind of showcasing everything that that country has to offer. So we're doing that in the pour-over method this time, rather than the French press, just to kind of mix it up and teach another brewing style.
Okay, so what one would you say you prefer? I know you like the French press.
I prefer the French press.
And why do you prefer the French press over the pour-over method?
It's all about the oils from the coffee, keeping those and that flavor. The pour-over method's great for making a cup of coffee. Personally, French press is my favorite, though.
Right, it does use that filter that you
It
talked
does
about.
use the filter, yes.
Okay, all right. So how does the pour-over work? You just sit the grounds in there and just go to town, or?
It's a little bit more nuanced than that, but you're on the right track here. So I've measured out the coffee again. We're doing 2 tablespoons per 8 or 6 fluid ounces of water. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to slowly wet our grounds. I'm just going to rotate this here so I can get good coverage.
See, if you didn't know, everything about coffee is just very gentle. See how it takes its time here? Very delicate with the water pouring.
Yep, and we're going to let that sit now that the grounds are wet.
Okay.
And this allows you to release the coffee once it's wet and hot. It's going to start releasing CO2. And we're going to allow it to do this. And then we're going to brew after we get some of those gases out of there.
Gotcha. So, how long does that usually take?
You're going to let it bloom for maybe 20 seconds. So not long at all.
Okay.
So, but
A little quicker than the French press method.
Exactly. But then now we're going to go to town. And you can do this any way you like. I like to do little small circles
Gotcha.
as it goes around, just slowly letting it brew.
This is like the hourglass of coffee brewing. And just slowly but surely
Exactly.
get all that coffee together.
Some people like to go back and forth and do little lines. It's all about just doing that little design that you want in the grounds. The important thing being, whatever you're doing, you're getting good, even coverage.
Gotcha. All right, take it away, Brandon.
All right, now that we're done brewing, we'll go ahead and pour some here.
Oh, so kind of you. Thank you.
Let me not forget my manners as pouring coffee. So just like the last time, let's just go ahead and smell it.
You can definitely, all coffee is not the same, clearly. You can definitely smell the differences.
Oh yeah, this is one of my favorite coffees, really highlights the beauty of Indonesian coffee. We're gonna go ahead and slurp.
All right.
I really like Asia Pacific coffees because of the real mossy, earthy taste that you can get in them. Such as this coffee, just one of my absolute favorites, and as you can tell, very different from the Guatemalan region coffee. So while we're pairing with it is also very different. We're going for a much more muted pairing. Just a plain croissant, nothing overly sweet, almost erring towards savory, though not quite. And go ahead and try that. Break yourself off or grab the croissant, take a bite.
Oh, okay.
Definitely a very different experience than the chocolate, as you can tell.
It's very interesting. So, where do you get the ideas to pair coffee with what? Like, obviously, the chocolate worked very well with the Guatemalan blend. This croissant works very well with this blend. But usually, I think people think of coffee as something, oh, I'll grab a donut with it, or a scone, or a muffin. So, where do people get the ideas to pair, like, these type of things with coffee?
Part of it is trial and error, and part of it is just having a knowledge of what pairs well with what. I actually really like something like a croissant with this blend because not only is it less sweet, and the croissant itself doesn't have a ton of flavor, just a little bit of sweetness, and that helps really let the coffee stand on its own. It's a very strong flavored coffee, so it lets those flavors stand on their own without having to prop them up too much.
Gotcha.
But additionally, I like something kind of drier and flakier like a croissant because this coffee has a very wet mouthfeel. And what I mean by that, often like why having like a good dry red wine with a steak, the fattiness of the steak contrasts well with the dryness of the wine.
Right.
This is kind of the opposite of that, where the drier, more flaky croissant contrasts well with just that really like rich, moist coffee.
Got you. So, you would say then that wine tasting and coffee tasting are very much similar.
Very much similar. I don't know if the sommeliers would say so, but I would say there's a lot of similarities, yes.
Well, Brandon, I appreciate you stopping by and teaching me, as well as the viewers, more about coffee and the different brew methods, because I think a lot of us think of coffee as something very simple. So, thanks again. So now we have a look at what it's like to be a barista and some of the things that are involved with that job. But on the other hand now, we have a different sense of appreciation for coffee. I now understand the different blends and the different regions they come from and how the tasting of coffee is much like wine tasting. So next time you're getting a cup of coffee, think about some of the differences that might be there. Thanks for tuning into this episode of On the Inside.